There are definitely a lot of things that I don't know, but if there's one thing I know for sure is that the Xiaomi Redmi Note 7 doesn't really need an introduction, because I guess we all know why you're here. You want to know if this is the new king of budget in 2019, so let's just find out. And start off with the overview of what I have here in my hands, which is the Xiaomi Redmi Note 7, obviously in black, but of course it's available in different colors as well. To no one's surprise, it packs glass on its front, and even though it typically for Xiaomi has actually quite a good oleophobic coating, I've also noticed that when the screen is on, you see, while in use, more smear than on some other phones. Maybe not a huge deal for some, but definitely worth mentioning. And this time we also have glass on the back with all its pros and cons that I'm definitely not gonna get into in this video. But if you want to protect that glass back, we get a pretty nice working black see-through case that almost adds no extra bulk, fits very snug, and adds extra grip. Unfortunately, though, no protection off the front, but I still like it quite a lot because it's in the box and you get it for free, so why not just use it? Other than that, ever so slightly higher placed on the back, we have the fingerprint reader that works out pretty good, as you can see, reliable, but also not quite as typically Xiaomi fast. There is a little bit of a delay and there is a little bit of an animation. I don't know quite why, but in the past I've also seen those fingerprint readers getting faster with updates. And that should also happen with the face unlock, because what happens every time is like it takes a second to think, what should I do? Oh, face unlock, and then it happens. So this one I've seen already a lot faster. Camera protrudes on the back a little bit, sides are grippy, and once again I'm applauding them for their button placement. It's so well and easy, convenient to reach. They almost don't wiggle at all. We have two things that we don't usually see that often anymore on phones: the headphone jack and an IR blaster, along with the typically still there microphone, SD card and SIM card tray, USB Type-C, speaker on the right, mic on the left. We have also a tiny little white only notification LED that I'm not quite sure who it would help, because people sometimes just rely on them, and just a so tiny small one I don't think will help. Which is a little bit bigger but not an issue for me is the notch. I mean, it doesn't really bother me, but there are two things that I have to mention. First of all, why is it bigger in terms of the status bar than it needs to be, and why is there an option to hide it? Maybe this will come in future updates, but they could have made this more subtle. I mean, obviously also, as you can see, the side bezels aren't the smallest ones, but I'm okay with that. This is a budget phone after all, but what I have to say is absolutely great, especially in this price range, is the build quality. This phone feels overall so smooth, so well executed, and it is also a little bit smaller than most other phones with 6.2 inches in this stretch design. It is way nicer to hold than I think the Xiaomi Redmi Note 5 was, so I actually like all of that pretty much. Now about the display. The one thing that I don't really like still, and I would wish for them to finally change it, that when we use automatic contrast, yes, we can change the white balance, but what we can't do is do the same in increased contrast. And the reason why I'm using this automatic contrast in bright situations in sunlight just over contrast things, and then you get double contrast, which is not that nice to see. So you kind of need to use increased contrast where we actually get pretty nice colors. I just have to say that, because generally they are a little bit saturated, which is nice. The viewing angles are good. Maximum white point would be 540 lux, which is a little bit of above average. The IPS glow is totally solid. Black levels are good. But what I've noticed, that this display in normal use, while you are just looking at pictures or while you are watching video, is fine. But what I've noticed in fast movement, then it shows its downsides. Because, for example, once this loads, you will see that it seems to have a lower refresh rate and quite some ghosting, because fast scrolling and everything seems to wash in together. So it generally doesn't feel super smooth. So it doesn't feel like 60 Hertz for some reason. It feels a little bit less. I'm not quite sure, but it is obvious. I would definitely blame this on the display. I'm not quite sure what is going on. And then, for example, one thing to be mentioned, there is a little bit of a black shadow. Generally, besides that, though, it is an absolutely fine display. Not a huge issue, but especially in movement, in fast movement, this could be an issue also a little bit in games. It could have been better. About the speaker, that's good enough, and that's what a speaker is, because it is loud enough in most situations, all is fine, and it sounds generally pretty decent. I mean, it's warm enough, rich enough. It's not great, and it still does the bottom firing mono speaker, but actually for its price range it makes a pretty good job, which is definitely way better than pretty good is the headphone jack, because it is still noticeably louder than so many other phones. It's quite clean. We get extra options like settings and presets and so on. So yeah, that's where they still know to deliver. And the same usually is also the case for performance on Xiaomi phones, but in this case not quite so much, because this is packing a Snapdragon 660, which I've already said so many times is so close to the flagship level performance, but for some reason not here, because I've used enough Snapdragon 660 phones to notice a difference. This, especially also, which has to do with the screen a little bit, just doesn't feel as smooth. I mean, it's consistent and it is smooth, but it just feels to be a little bit hindered by some things. So it's mostly the smoothness of the screen that I would blame the performance for, because if you can see, apps actually launch pretty quickly. All that is good, but what doesn't work quickly is the multitasking, because as you can see here, this delay, this is too much. So generally, still a solid performer, does a good job. Also in games, doesn't really heat up, it has enough performance, doesn't really get warm. It is still, for its price, and well above performing phone. But it can do better. I'm pretty sure with updates this in the future will get better. Absolutely, I know Xiaomi well enough for that. Now about the battery, with the included charger, a full charge takes 2 hours and 10 with about 32% for half an hour. This is a good value, but it supports, from what I've seen, Quick Charge 4. Unfortunately, I don't have the charger to kind of back this up, but yeah, it could be faster, but it's fine. Now, at about 200 lux, 1 hour of YouTube takes 8%. This is well above the average, which is usually at about 12%. I have to say, what I still like a lot on this phone, just as I did last year with the Note 5, is the battery life. Because on average on mobile data, we get like 7 to 8 hours. I would say 7.5 on average. And this actually I would call a 2-day phone, because here I would say 6 to 7 hours with an average of 6.5. Standby rate was good, which for me it always is, for example, on the Chinese phones, not so much on the global versions. Even though I have to say I haven't used the global version for a while, so battery life is definitely its strong suit. About the software, I'm not gonna talk too much about it, because this is running, as you can see here, 10.2 in terms of the MIUI version, and MIUI throughout all its phones looks pretty much the same, so there's not much to say, like for example that there is a draw, that there is a theme engine, a lot of options. I want to kind of skip that and talk about things that are missing. Once again, unfortunately no NFC. There is also only White Wine L3, so no Netflix in HD, and yet no Band 20 version, but this is just a matter of time until that one will come. When it comes to Wi-Fi reception, that one was absolutely normal, just as well as the reception on mobile data, call quality as well, so also not much to say here. The only thing that I would have to mention, this obviously is the Chinese version, which has some annoyances that will get definitely sorted out in the global version, like bloat and maybe some services not syncing so much. So overall, it's a solid UI. Not everyone likes it. Maybe you have to customize a few things, but it generally works out pretty well. So let's talk about the cam, and about the camera app. I just want to say this. You can use it, absolutely not a problem, but it does all it does like it did in the past. I want to tell you that you should use the Gcam. The ported one from the Pixel app, from the Pixel 3, just works out better, because we have things like, for example, night sight. It's pretty easy to install. You just need to install the APK, and you generally get a way better camera experience. And you will hear me say this throughout the camera part a lot, which I will start off right now with the front cam. And here I have to say that it is pretty good, actually pretty nice and sharp. The bokeh mode is also, that's something that Xiaomi knows to do for quite a while already now. And here I, for example, noticed that Gcam actually messes this up a little bit, because I like the bokeh generally more on the Gcam than on any other cam. But here, for example, whenever you use the soft mode, everything else gets soft and loses details. So bokeh mode not so much here. And the same also goes actually for the front video, because on the main camera app it is totally okay, generally fine, good color balance, white balance, sharpness, quality generally is good. The crop is not that big, but it's not really stabilized, which it is with the Gcam, but here the EIS works a little bit odd. It's also heavily cropped in, and it's also quite jittery, so a little bit of an odd shake is there. So generally for the front cam, I would say use the stock cam, but for everything else from now on, I would say use the Gcam, because results will be very much better. Because for example, low light, I mean, it's not that good. I would say it's quite soft, but But that's also a thing that works for the Gcam. Autofocus in lower light situations doesn't work so much, especially on smaller objects. But if you use Gcam, especially with night sight, you will get a lot more details in the pictures. They will be brighter and definitely better quality. But I've seen better cameras here. About the cam on the back, generally actually quite good. Color seem nice, the autofocus in general situations works good, white balance is good, details are good. But once you use Gcam, everything gets, I would say, definitely significantly better and improves the overall quality by at least half a star. Because yes, it seems to kind of sometimes seem to over sharpen, but generally you get way more details and everything feels so much better, more realistic. So this bumps up this cam from an above average mid-range cam to a noticeably above average budget cam. About the video on the back, well, on the main app, I don't know why, and I could show you this, it has no 4K. We are limited at 1080p 30 and 1080p 60 and also 720, but I have to say that 1080p, no matter what, doesn't look good on this phone. It just looks way too washed out, way too smooth. Autofocus and everything works out well, but I would definitely once again have to say use the Gcam. It has 4K and it has EIS that works a little bit more natural. It's just a way better solution in general. So what I see in general is a lot of potential for Xiaomi to improve this phone. It's absolutely a thing. They can do it. The software is pretty early on this phone, but those updates, those optimizations have to be done, because I absolutely don't get that not everyone wants to use a third-party app. I mean, it's not a huge deal to install it, but it shouldn't be something that you just have to. But in this case, it kind of is a must-have or a must-do. The microphone itself, I have to say, is quite clean. It's not really rich, but it's okay, and generally a little bit less tinny than it was in the past. So I'm good with that, and that's it about the camera. Okay, so I actually want to start off the conclusion by answering one question that I think a lot of people have. Should I upgrade from the Xiaomi Redmi Note 5 to the 7? And here my definite answer is no. Because even though a few things got better, a lot of things also stayed about the same, which doesn't make it really a worthwhile upgrade. But everyone who's coming from something weaker, older or cheaper definitely should take this phone into consideration, because I'm absolutely sure about one thing. At a price of around $200, and we all know the price will actually drop quite quickly, this will be one of the best budget phones in 2019, just like the 5 was. But also, if you ask me, should you buy it, I would at least tell you that you should put into consideration, if you want something a little bit bigger and maybe are able to pay a little bit more, you should go for the Pocophone F1, because with a Snapdragon 845, even better speakers, even better battery life, it is just a more future-proof phone that gives you even more, maybe a better bang for your buck. I mean, it's not quite sure, and I'm pretty sure that there are people who this will work better for than the Pocophone F1, because they maybe don't want plastic build or something like that, or they want just something more smaller and compact. It might make sense. And both definitely deliver a great bang for your buck. But other than that, I don't really see any bigger competition at around $200 or less for this phone, just like it was in the past. There are many that come close, but not really that actually are a threat to it. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Until next time, bye.